I'm too nervous now. So would I go? I'd play major over that. Would I? Rather
yeah. So think D major.
Alex, I first met probably nearly 20 years ago now, and you've had a long career of being a guy that music brands will come to and say, can you help us promote this product, do some demos, some videos, whatever it might be, shows. Obviously, you're a touring guitar player as well. I don't know a lot about your own solo stuff, but obviously you've played with some very high-profile players, and we'll talk about that. I wasn't sure. I've seen you do sort of like JTC stuff, but I didn't know whether you do just like, is there an Alex Hutchins learn to play guitar course, type thing. But I don't know what's the, and I'm fairly sure again, when you've been in the past, we've done a sort of a, who did you grow up listening to and all that kind of stuff. So without wanting to repeat that, just what has your working kind of career sort of, where's it taken you, and is it a conscious decision to try and keep your finger in a few different pies, or are you just sort of going where the wind takes you, sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, I'm first and foremost, I'm just consider myself someone who loves music, and I am not like a career kind of driven person. I have never set out to achieve this or to achieve that, other than to just enjoy playing the guitar. That's it. So I never had a plan, I just did what I did. And in fact, I mean, so it's kind of, my life has been quite an organic path, and I've just kind of, like I say, gone where the wind has taken me. So when I was 15, people started to ask me to teach them even then. So I was like, sure, So I started to pick up, students then, and I already was in a social club band. So I was just kind of doing that whilst doing my GCSEs, and enjoying that. In fact, I also, I had a job in CityLink of all, that parcel company when I was about 15. And then, and it was, the reason I quit was because I got into a band and we were doing 2-3 gigs a week, 60s covers or whatever. Yeah. So I started to cut my teeth on that, as it were. And then I got to that kind of decision when I reached 18. I finished my A-levels. I'm like, all my friends were going off to college, uni. Oh yeah, I'm going to do this. And I was like, I didn't know what I wanted. Did I want to do a performance degree, or did I want to do a composition degree? I was really in two minds. And I thought, what I don't want to do is rush the decision and spend 3 or 4 years doing the wrong one. So I'm just going to take a gap year. That was 24 years ago. So it's the longest gap year you could ever take. But what happened was I started to play with this band and then the next band. And then I got into like a big band and started to do gigs abroad. And then lo and behold, I found myself already teaching and playing, making a living. And I thought, well, I can write my own music. I can keep practicing. And actually another determining factor was I was very interested in the guitar schools. So I actually visited, there was the ACM, I think it's here, isn't it? I even went to LA to look at the GIT, and also Frank Gambale was associated with, I think it was called Lama, something like that. So there's a few schools there that I went to see. And respectfully, at the time, I didn't feel that it was right for me either, because I was looking at the sort of players that, not Frank Gambale, obviously he's a huge influence, but you know, in some of the other schools. And one thing I took away from the open day, though, which was really cool. So the open day said, all right, guys, you know, if you're going to come here, we're going to expect full commitment. You got to do at least 4 hours practice a day, you know. And I sat there and I thought, I bet most people that come are not going to do that. They're probably going to like doss around a bit. So what I'll do is I'll do 8 hours a day and not pay the 20 grand. So I took that inspiration and thought, so that's how I'm going to try and get myself further, you know.
How do you, I was thinking about this question sort of last night, and I'm always interested in musicians' choices as to the sort of genres of music that they ultimately end up playing. And I sort of feel that you've obviously followed quite a non-commercial, you know, you look at what you play in your own stuff. It's not a sort of a mass appeal kind of music. And I wondered if there was any points in that sort of 25 years of you playing guitar where you've gone, do you know what, I've made a conscious decision to take a path that's going to be musically more rewarding but financially less rewarding, and I perhaps could have gone in a way of going, I could have just, I don't know, written some cowboy chords and I don't know, been that guy and perhaps had some music that was commercially much more successful but perhaps not as, and I'm just interested if that's ever come up or if it's only ever been this sort of pursuit of the music you love.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I kind of have, it's not a stock answer, but I think it articulates how I really feel about this. So, for example, I absolutely love Stevie Wonder, but I've never been bothered being the guitar player in his band. Because to me, I want to be Stevie Wonder. He's the cool guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a shadow in the background. So I'd rather play how I could. I'd rather try and express myself fully how I feel music to a smaller audience than be governed by another situation. So, I mean, in fact, I remember I went to the O2 and watched Stevie Wonder's band, you know, however many years ago, and I would respectfully say the guitarists were sort of mediocre, and that's okay, because that's what they're doing. You know, they both took this great big solo at the end, and I thought, okay, that's fine. Yeah. It didn't move me from a guitaristic point of view. So, as I said earlier, I've always aspired to be a musician, not necessarily a guitarist either. So my definition, I suppose, is a musician is someone who tries to express themselves the way they feel. If you get into a situation where it's like, no, do it like this, then that's someone else's vision, and that's challenging for me to be in that position.
Interestingly, on that Stevie Wonder guitar player thing, Pete Honore's got a phrase that he uses a lot, which is, does he say keeping the shop or watching the shop? I think he calls it keeping the shop. And it's his role as the guitar player in a band where you're not stepping forward and doing a solo.
Absolutely.
And it's like, that in itself, I think, is requires a certain degree of excellence to be able to keep the shop.
Discipline.
You know, and it's like you're almost seeing yourself maybe as perhaps slightly more of the rhythm section than you are necessarily as more of a sort of a soloist and I sort of feel like I think it's different skills and disciplines. It's like 100% you've got somebody that can play virtuoso stuff, and then I think it's a different skill to say, can you be the guy that keeps shop? You know, just like.
Absolutely.
But I wasn't, I think the question was probably less about did you want to be Stevie Wonder and more about was there ever a point where you thought, could I be Richie Sambora or Eddie Van Halen, or, you know, like be the guitar player in an overtly out there guitar band, but that was perhaps a bit more in a mainstream genre rather than, you know, slightly more sort of jazzy kind of stuff or prog.
Well, it's very interesting because it depends on the definition of well, let's say take the word success, what one defines as success. Whether you need other people to tell you or recognize it, or if you can just do it. And to me, I was concerned with just the enjoyment in myself to be able to play how I want to play. And that's literally it. I told you, earlier, I aspire to be a musician. I'm not worried. I'm not a career guy. I don't think that way. I just love music, and yeah, possibly to my detriment, maybe. But then again, there are other people that chase things and think that way. I just never have. But what I have chased, particularly growing up when I was practicing, I just was so desperate to want to play as good as I could that governed my decision making. So that's really it. And so in my heart, I remember getting to a point when I was about 27, and at that point I was practicing like mad, and I had this run of 5 gigs, and I was like doing 12 hours a day and all this stuff. And then I said to myself, you know what, I'm just going to take a few days off, right? And I took a few days off. I recorded the gig, and I played it back a few days later. And I was so surprised when I listened back to myself. I was like, wow, it was everything that I wanted to achieve for me, right? Which was, I had what I felt was, pretty good phrasing. I had lots of cool sweep stuff. I had all the legato stuff that I had wanted to express, all packaged up in, like, there's this one particular song where I was just going for it. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And suddenly I felt to myself I'd reached a level of satisfaction with what I was trying to acquire musically. That's not to say that it stops there, but at that moment in time, that's what I was so thrilled with what I heard, because I'd spent 10 years being so self-deprecating, like, oh, I'm rubbish, I must be better. So I actually would hate hearing myself. So it was such an amazing feeling. I was like, oh my God, it actually sounds okay. And that was the day I stopped practicing. Now, that's not a good thing, but it's the reality. At that point, I was like, oh. And this is before the YouTube. I
don't need to get any faster.
No, absolutely not. If anything, I've gotten slower over the years. But it's because it's less meaningful for me, because that's not the end goal. Of course it's not. But expressing oneself and playing fast and playing technically in itself is an expression. I think you're either drawn to it or you're not. So if you're drawn to it, then go for it. But not everyone is. And of course, that's fine as well. So I'd got to that level at that point, and then I asked myself, well, what am I doing this? Because I was just doing the local pub scene, and I started to look around, and then I did some West End work, did that kind of thing, and I kind of went on to do obviously the stuff with the Boss guys and the Roland, and started doing some of that kind of work, and just went into the world playing and just went where the wind took me,
I'm sort of thinking, I mean, it's fun. I always think success should be a very personal thing. So, and I think the older you get as well, you realise that happiness is the ultimate success. But yes. I think within music, on the one hand, it's an art form, and so best is a pointless. It doesn't apply. It's just it's a personal thing. But of course, society puts the confines of, well, how many records did you sell equals success.
Of course.
Which is I think it's a very superficial view of success, but it's often the only way that you can compare apples with oranges, right? But I get the impression for you a sense of self-satisfaction and achievement and love for music is what you're pursuing, rather than necessarily making money.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, that sounds vulgar, but that is...
No, it's true. Yeah, that was my highest priority. Because first and foremost, as I say, I aspire to be a musician, someone that makes music for the love of making it. And to your point earlier about, like, writing cowboy chord songs and stuff, I've written loads of songs, but no one's heard them. So I enjoy the process of writing it. I'm very proud of some songs I've written. It's just that I haven't outwardly put them out into the world because of what I said about not chasing that. But I enjoy the process of writing those songs. There's songs that no one's ever heard that I did because of that afternoon or that evening. I was, it was raining outside and it was whatever, and I was feeling a certain way, and I wrote the song because that's what a musician does. I think that feels that way. That wants. I describe it sometimes like being sick. It's like sometimes you just feel better when it comes out. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so when you're feeling a certain way with a song, you know, you have to get it out. It's like you can't do anything other than that. The part where it needs to be shared and then recognized by others is the interesting part, because, you know, this reminds me of a thing with like Eva Cassidy, for example. Are you familiar with Eva Cassidy? Beautiful singer. You know, such a tragic story, but you know, here she was, this mother of two, doing the local, I think it was Chicago, but in America, you know, doing her local gigs and just sounding beautiful, incredible performer, and a good player, actually, acoustic guitar player. And she must have been, you know, touching people with her performances to like, you know, 40, 50 people. And then obviously, unfortunately, she tragically passed away, and then bam, the whole world woke up and went, oh, she's amazing, and then sold 10 million records. But to me, the bittersweet thing of that is that she was already doing the thing that was great, you know. And it's almost like some people will try to manipulate the world to say, recognize me, look, I'm doing this, but I don't think of it that way. I just enjoy doing it, and it's maybe old-fashioned, cliche, whatever, but it's just honestly the truth, you know.
I think it's great that you. I think it's great that you understand that, because I suppose that this is perhaps a nice segue onto that sort of. Does guitar make you happy and unhappy in equal? Like, there's a happiness obviously when you accomplish something. But what's the flip side of that? When you can't get the thing out that's in you, either because, you know, your fingers don't move fast enough, or there's some disconnect between the thing you know is in there somewhere. But because I know lots of guitar players, and normally they're the incredibly talented ones, who are so internally beaten up by the fact that they don't think they're as good as they should be, that actually the guitar makes them unhappy.
Yeah, right.
In a way that I think, like, mortal people like myself just go, my God, you know, I wouldn't give my right arm to be as good as that, because I couldn't be as good as that if I had one arm. But, you know, maybe I'd give a right leg, you know. But I don't know. It's.
Well, I look at it like this. I use the term musician very specifically rather than guitarist, because to me, I put music above everything. Like, in the sense that true music speaks to us regardless of who's playing it, what it is, sex, color, gender. It doesn't matter. If it sounds brilliant and it's on a record and we can't see the person, it still speaks to us. So, I mean, it's not about the person. So I think about music, as wacky as it might sound, but think of it as this almighty thing in the sky, right? That music just exists, and us mortals, if we're lucky, we can pull some inspiration when we're trying to play it. That's how I look at music. It's got nothing to do with me. I have a responsibility to practice my instrument and try to like capture a minute of inspiration. And that's how I look at it. And I feel lucky if I get a bit of it, you know, at any given time, you know. And when I play, I try to access that. And it's that moment of enjoyment, which is the musical thing. So if you allow the instrument to determine limitations, I don't know. I've been lucky that I've worked hard enough on the guitar that I don't feel or see those limitations personally. And as I mentioned earlier, I got to a point where I felt satisfied that I'd achieved what I wanted to. But again, here's the important thing that I think everyone should consider. We're all unique people, and we all have, that bar is different for every single person. So whilst my bar might be doing all this crazy stuff, the next person might be playing Wonderwall down the pub, and they might dream of like one day, oh, if I can like get this up together and play it at the pub, like, yeah, and they like get in, and he plays it with all his mates, like, whoa, mate, you're wicked. And he's got to the satisfaction bar for him.
Yeah.
It's just that for us, it's always different. So again, there's loads of bars higher than where I got to at that point, but it just was the first time in my life I felt, wow, a little bit of satisfaction. And I was thrilled about that. But you see, also music, like I say, is beyond the instrument. So I grew up playing saxophone. I mean, I'm not very good on piano, but I can play a bit of piano and sing a little bit, playing. So it's more than just the instrument to me, the music as a whole. So I love listening to Luther Vandross, for example, or whoever. It's the communication of the person's kind of soul, is what I love about it.
Is there a gig you think that you could get that would tick every, what's the right word? Is there one gig that you could get that you would just go, do you know what, that would in one moment would tick every thing I ever wanted to achieve?
No, actually. except what the caveat to that is, the only thing would be to have the kind of players all in one room be able to play some of my music, my instrumental music, and I have done that at various points. Problem is, all of my favorite players are all dotted around the world. A bass player here.
Just to hear how they would interpret some of your own music.
Yes, which I have had the fortune to do. I would just like to be able to do that a little more regularly. And I've realised as I've gotten older that there are ways that probably, if I think about the career side, I could probably make that happen more than just sitting around hoping it would happen. You know what I mean? So. But other than that, just to do the thing that I love to do with musicians that are of that kind of caliber, that I could get excited by hearing how they play it more regularly. So I have done it, just not as regularly as what would be.
I think when I've met Matthias Assato, just a show to say hello.
Yeah.
I've not had the opportunity to do this, which I would love to do one day. But I think when he got the Bruno Mars gig, you just end up going like, because like he's obviously pretty comfortable with his ability. He knows he can do whatever he wants to do. And then I don't know, I just think it's almost like that whole show of just like, and you talk about being a musician, you're almost taking it to the next level of being a performer then, aren't you? So
yes.
You're going, I've got the chops, but I'm also going to have to do a bit of a stage routine. And I don't know, I kind of feel like, I wonder if, those types of gigs are just like those magic unicorn things that just, a very select number of players will get to play. And
yeah, but honestly though, like I said, even hearing you describe that, it doesn't massively appeal. Like the irony with this is, as I mentioned to you off camera, that I may have to go and do a gig similar to that in China. It may or may not happen yet. I don't know. And I was talking to Ian earlier about how I live my life is like when opportunities present themselves, you have a choice. You either go, I could do that, but I'm not bothered, or you try to make them happen. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. So this opportunity's presented itself. I didn't chase it. I didn't say, I really want to play with this pop star or that pop star. But it's found its way on my lap. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it a go. Because, so, and much like the Stephen Wilson tour, it was a similar thing, to be honest. That gig, obviously Guthrie did it for a bunch of years. And of all the gigs out there of that kind of level you're talking about, again, even with that one, it was a consideration. And I think, because obviously Guthrie did it, there's that lovely kudos about his playing and some of the stuff. So I'd get to play a bit, I'd have to keep the shop, as you mentioned earlier, or whatever, and that was my experience of doing that very thing you said. But again, it kind of found its way to me. I wasn't chasing it, and when it presented itself, I said, I'm going to give this a go. I had to do the audition, I had to do all the stuff with it, and I would still put it in that category that it was my responsibility as a professional musician to be there on time, to play exactly, not mess up, I always said a swear word, not mess up, and do the job and do it well and do what was required of me. And if I'm honest, it was, by the end of it, which was 14 months, I struggled a bit actually with the very thing that I just told you about, because I wasn't able to be 100% myself playing, because I had to honor the gig, and it was my duty and role to do that, which I did. I believe I did that, and it, I think Steve was happy at the time, but it was a different thing for me. Like I felt like I couldn't express myself 100%. I was able to do it a certain percentage, but I had to respect his music and the rules. And when I think about why I picked this thing up and to try to express myself, it was to do the very thing that I love to do. And to me, that is the most important thing to me, and so consequently, that's how I look at it. But the irony is, I might have to do something where I barely get to do that at all, but I'm doing it for a life experience, not so much the musical experience.
And so you should. I mean, I think that's the common thread that you hear with musicians, I think, or certainly the ones I've met, is it's say yes to everything. And turn up on time. It's like, and be nice. Be a nice guy, turn up on time, say yes to everything. You'll get a long way.
Absolutely.
If you just, those 3 rules. Well, look, I want to talk about, we're going to have some fun. I really don't want to sort of do the pile-on thing about some of your music that was recently sort of ripped off. So, but we're going to try and talk about that in a sort of a more broad sense, I think, afterwards, and perhaps how maybe the root of the problem here is the YouTube audience. Maybe it's not just YouTube, just this idea that everything has to be perfect nowadays. You have to look amazing, you have to be amazing, you have to say amazing things, you have to play amazing guitar. And what is that doing to the sort of the mental health of particularly the younger people out there trying to do this thing? So that's coming up after. I kind of feel we should have a bit of a musical interlude.
Yeah, let's play.
We should talk about this guitar. This is the most normal looking guitar I've ever seen you bring to Andertons.
We should talk about that.
So what is this? Is this like, we've gone full circle, have we?
Absolutely.
I don't know, you've got some headless guitars here. We've got an amplifier which you're using, which you can go and see a full video on this amp demo, links below if you want to, separate to this video. And again, he's such a wonderfully tasteful player, and you talked a bit in that clip before about, reaching this pinnacle of kind of, so I'm wondering whether you can even remember any of those kind of licks and stuff and give us a bit of a flavour of what that was. But first and foremost, let's start. The last time I saw you, you had some handmade British guitar that was very non-traditional shaped.
Yes.
Was very much something you'd worked with the luthier to create. And now you've got a Super Strat. What's happened?
Yes. Okay. No. Great point. So yeah, I worked with a luthier for about 10 years, maybe 12 years, and it was I was at that crossroads where I was playing Music Man guitars before, and I loved those guitars, and I won one of them in the competition, which is why I ended up having one, and I was about to potentially endorse them, and I'd spoken to them, but then I felt like I wanted to do something different, so I went down the route of like fully customized, and that's why I did that. I wanted to change. After the last few years, I felt like a change, right? I'd played a few other brands, different brands. And what happened with this one was I was in Poland. A chap came up and showed me this guitar. It was a Nuts guitar. It was a Mayonnaise guitar, which is the Polish brand. And it had not stickers. It was built into the guitar, all of these photographs of him with his heroes. Right. So you had Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Ozzy Osbourne, Zakk Wylde, Guthrie Govan, Alex Hutchins, And I was like, what the and he showed me it, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Look, you're there. And I was like, wow. And I played the guitar, and I was like, well, this sounds really nice. Long story short, it was a Mayonnaise guitar, and he said, I'm sure they would love to build one for you. I said, oh, okay. Long story short, I spoke to the guys at Mayonnaise, and they said, we'd like to build you a guitar. I was like, wow, thank you. And I said, there's one caveat, though, which is I would be absolutely honoured, but I can't guarantee, I don't want to suddenly endorse, I don't want to do anything, because I need to know I'm going to like the guitar. If you're happy to make it on that grounds, then I would be honoured. So they made this one.
I thought that was an Ibanez.
This is a Hydra. It's a Mayonnaise.
Right.
I love it. And here's the beautiful thing about it. They were so confident in their design that I would like it. They made it, and I instantly fell in love with it and started playing it. So that's how it started. And then for the last year and a half, I've been using these two guitars on some more like heavy kind of stuff. But then I heard this amp, and I thought, I want to get back to that kind of style of playing. And so I asked them about having a bit more of a conventional sound because I feel like I'm in a kind of a new, like, I don't know, not necessarily Phoenix Rising, but I'm kind of in a change mentality. So going back to basics, having a really beautiful organic tone, understated guitar, bit more classic sounding, that's where I'm at.
I've never left that.
Yeah.
So, as in, I think largely just because technically I don't warrant, or I don't need, and maybe I'm too old and I like conventional stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm not even really sure. People talk about this kind of idea of, people talk about Stevie Ray and having guitars that fight against you and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know that I necessarily buy into that personally, But I think growing up playing Strats and Tellys and Les Pauls and accepting that all of them have some design flaw or other, whether it's not quite in tune or they have a bit of a hum or whatever it might be, but embracing that. And then when someone gives you a guitar and none of that is there anymore, sort of going like, oh, if such a thing can be too perfect, where I'm like, oh, I kind of miss the imperfections.
Yes.
And I don't know if that, I mean, actually, to be fair, whether there are any sense of sort of imperfections on a Mayonnaise sort of super Strat style like that. But I guess just the fact, its shape is so conventional, But play us some stuff. I mean, I've always respected Mayonnaise as a builder, I mean, they do make some amazing guitars.
Yeah.
I think so. It's good to see you playing them.
Yeah.
Is this real relicking as well, or is this?
Yes. Yeah. Well, no. Sorry. Sorry. It is. It's their relic, but sorry.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Just quickly, you mentioned about the Stevie Ray guitar fighting back. I think to me, I feel that the instrument does pull different things out from me. So instinctively, on a guitar like this, it just slows me down, which is a good thing, probably half the time.
Why? I'm in, because look, what is it about the whether it's the headless guitar or what was the brand of the one you had before? That was
it's called Waghorn. Tom Waghorn.
Yes. That's right. What was it about those that physically makes you go faster than a Super Strat style?
It's hard to say. I mean, again, maybe, so much of life can be psychosomatic in a way. You know what I mean? You kind of think
faster.
It just, you just sort of think a certain way, maybe. And like you're saying about the classic look of a guitar, it makes me think. I mean, a good example would be for anyone that may or may not be familiar. When I did a lot of the JTC stuff back in the day, one of my tracks that was more popular was something called Feeling Fine, and this is the chord progression. Nice and simple. Now, the way that it went was quite simple. Whatever, that kind of
nice and
phrasing
bluesy
stuff.
Sort of phrasing, yeah.
But what people don't know is that I first recorded a take on my Music Man, and Jan, who's the chap there, said, try it on this. Handed me a Strat and I played that solo.
Right.
Now, it would be fascinating to hear back the take, because he's probably got them on a hard drive somewhere, but it just worked because he kind of sensed where the track should be, handed me a Strat that wasn't mine. It had 10s on it or whatever, which I normally play 9s and even dabbled with 8s in the past, but I'm playing 9s these days. So even if I pick up a guitar with 10s, it extracts different things from me. So that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, it's almost like maybe I don't want to play fast on something like this, but it's there, if I wanted it to be, but it has to come out in the right way, you know, like, you know, I mean, it's there, but
You're not exactly a slouch on this guitar, are you?
It just depends what I'm trying to feel musically, and it's interesting actually because I remember years ago, like, you know, obviously we've done a bunch of things over the years, haven't we? And there's one thing I actually regret doing on this channel,
go on then.
and it was just that because it was tongue in cheek, and you went, God, just play something crazy, you know, because we were talking about licks or something, and I didn't in that particular moment. I wasn't like feeling it in a way, and so God knows what I did, but it was probably dreadful. And I remember feeling like, oh, I didn't even like what I did. And so now, that one thing, funny enough, I thought about it driving up as well. I was like, yeah, actually, I probably said, oh, I'm not sure, I'll whatever. And it would have been better to not do anything because when I play that way these days, I try to be so connected with what I'm doing. I only do it if I feel that. Mm-hmm. in a musical way, and when I look at runs or technical stuff, it has to have a purpose. To me, I see stuff like that as a moment of intensity, but if it's just pulled out of thin air, it kind of grates against me as a musician, and I find it really hard to do, which is a weird thing, I know, but it's just how I feel. So yeah, I mean, so when I'm playing a guitar like this and an amp like this, I'm not feeling that thing so much. It's weird. Put me in a high gain amp and put that on and and I'll do Malmsteen all day long, you know. But it has to be the musical part of it.
It feels like, I think there's an even more of an extension of that. You've bought your Boss GT 1000 or whatever it is over there. And I'm sure you mentioned before when you do this gig in China, you'll take that and you'll do the 4-cable method and all this. But I think there's some interesting substance behind this idea of going, actually, if I do just have an amp with no effects in it and a guitar that's pretty conventional versus headless guitar with multi-effects and all that. Although ultimately it's still the same 6 strings, and you know, I do think it kind of, it's like just putting a different postcode into SatNav, isn't it? It's just going to go, you're in the same car, whatever, you know, you're on the same roads, but just this rig is going to take you here, and that rig is going to take you there, whether you like it or not. It's just it's just a subconscious inevitability, and and I wonder if it's interesting how, because we always look at music over the decades and how it. I mean, it's interesting at the moment because in the past, perhaps mainstream media has sort of dictated everybody's listening to the same music all the time, which obviously doesn't happen anymore. You know, you can just choose to what to listen to. But you still see these kind of trends happening, particularly in sort of gear sales. And I do think it's inevitable that just people need to just go, I'm just a bit bored of where I've been. So it's not that it's bad gear. It's just like
a change.
It's like, where am I going now? Yeah. And I think that's the joy of this idea that old traditional stuff, modern stuff, MIDI stuff, wherever it goes, it's just, I just think nobody's ever going to just stay in one lane and go there. I think everybody's just naturally inquisitive about, what would happen if I just went down this bit? And sometimes it's the gear. Well, or even subliminal choices. You don't even realise that's what's happening, but you just sort of, you heard this amp, oh, that's nice, and I'll get myself a slightly more traditional guitar. It's not, I don't think it's a conscious effort to go, I must learn some blues chops. No, you know, it's just like...
I think if you're honest about your musicality / expression, I come back to the same thing. It's like, what are you trying to achieve for you? Never mind what people think of you. Never mind what other people want. What's honestly the thing that you love to do, and that can change. You know, as I said to you, you know, I grew up listening to Malmsteen at one point, but I also listened to George Benson, also Andy Timmons, or Pat Martino, or whoever, or singers like I mentioned, Luther Vandross, or whoever, like just music, saxophone players, Charlie Parker, you know, Miles Davis, whatever. Just listen to something. So we go on that journey. And that's kind of what's happened with me. Like, so last year, I released a whole EP with a chap named Phil Dyer, and we had...
Lovely Phil.
You know Phil, yeah.
Amazing player as well.
Yeah, and so we wrote and collaborated on a 5-track EP, and I was playing these guitars and all the rest of it. and that's like technical central. It's just me just all this stuff, and that was the mood I was in doing that stuff. Right now I can't think of anything less that I want to do because I'm not feeling that way, so if we do some more tracks, which we're planning to do, it's got to be like
tell me those chords. What was it?
Oh, yeah.
And
so
then
D major,
D major,
B minor,
sorry,
B minor, and then A minor to a G major 7.
Okay.
Or just a major, yeah.
See, I've got to hear that when you've gone to the C there.
Yeah.
I have to hear that wants to result down to there.
Yes.
Rather than having a technical understanding that that's the right thing to play, and I think that's my next. Hurdle, obstacle, light bulb moment.
Yeah.
That I need to go away from. Not that there's anything wrong. Well, no, that's not true. The fact that I can hear that's where it's supposed to go is a part of the journey as well.
Correct.
Because if I couldn't hear that that's where it's supposed to go, then even if I knew what to play, I wouldn't know to play it. But I want to know. I need to know that that's what to play as well as feel.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
No, it's a very important point that is the essence of you, like your musicianship. So let's say you were a full-time musician and you had more time on your hands, you would probably investigate that further because your ear is telling you something, and then you would then say, okay, what is that? Oh, okay, that. And that would be you just kind of getting your musical identity a little further along. But again, you obviously sound great in how you play, and you get around it by playing by ear. But maybe you need to take 6 months off from work.
Funnily enough, I don't know that it was. Some of the steps that I think I have managed to achieve haven't been like, oh, let's not work for 6 months and just practice. I mean, that for me, that type of putting the hours in, where I feel that is just in the dexterity. Mm-hmm. It's like, how clean can I get my picking?
Yeah.
How fast can I play? The musical choices, for me anyway, have been light bulb moments.
Yeah.
Have just been something goes, don't play that bit there. Just let it breathe for a minute.
Yep.
And then play it there.
Yeah.
And that's not, again, I can only talk personally, that hasn't been practice. That's just been, like I say, that's just been a ping. I'm truly great. I'm sure a lot of that is just hanging around, being around people like you and Danish Pete and all the other amazing guitar players that I get to meet. But yeah, it's I think sometimes it is just, it's not, I didn't sort of practice for 8 hours a day to be able to go, oh, don't play that. But I do think that what you're saying, I have no idea. As soon as you start talking about triads and, I think I sort of vaguely understand the concept of three notes within a chord being a triad.
Yeah.
But if you sort of said, right, play a G, now play me all the triads that would go in G up the neck, I'd be just like, no, I have no idea where they are or what those notes would be. And I do think I should probably put some effort into learning those.
It wouldn't take long at all, and the key is playing by ear at first is the most important part, because that is your musical desire, if you will. You're hearing stuff, and in fact, I even heard John Mayer saying something recently, which I thought was quite nice, and he was saying give me any guitar player and I'll make them better by just saying this one thing, which is quite a bold statement, but it was a good one, which is something like, even without a guitar in your hands, you should be able to kind of sing a solo or hum a solo. And I thought that's a really good thing to say, because it's the inner voice that we're trying to express. And that's why I mentioned again about trying to be a musician rather than a guitarist or a saxophone player, or letting your instrument dictate your musicianship. It goes beyond that. It's like everything you've ever heard amalgamates into your taste. And as a musician, I believe that you should try to extrapolate that and be able to express it upon command. And it's a never-ending journey. And obviously, there's some music which is more challenging than others to do that with. So if it is just a few chords, then at least it's a little bit easier, the material.
Yeah.
As you kind of get into the giant steps of the world and stuff, it gets, like...
The John Mayer comment, I think if you, what it does is, for me anyway, is it really validates repetition within playing guitar solos. Because if you think of any great song, the vocal melody line through a chorus and a verse will almost certainly be 4 repeated phrases.
Yes.
And then into a chorus where maybe that's 2 or 4 repeated melodic phrases. And the words are different, obviously, which I suppose when you're singing gives this, it perhaps distracts maybe from the repetitiveness of the melody. But actually, every great song is largely a very repeated line of melody. Exactly. And actually, when you solo, if you just go, it's okay. It's actually, and that's what I was saying, the light bulb moment, repetitive with space solo is technically easier than relentless shredding.
Yeah, and more pleasing.
And often creates a much nicer musical.
Yes.
Anyway, what do I know?
No. If I may, because on that note, I mean, you mentioned earlier about teaching. So the last 2 or 3 years, I've been doing a lot of online lessons, and so I typically get more advanced players. So I talk about these kind of topics and phrasing and this kind of stuff to really help people. I often see people struggle with that very thing. And interestingly, what you've just said is essentially what I try to convey to people, which is about making your guitar solo have a melodic sense. The phrasing is very much, like you said, repeating short musical ideas, ba 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 ba. It gives the audience a sense of connection, like, oh, I see, oh yeah, and you highlight there's a bit of variation, then you do this. If you can at least start your solo with that mindset. So you perfectly described phrasing, really.
I love that in music. I want the sort of the comfort blanket, the cuddle of feeling like I know what's coming next, so I can hum it. But then what you love every so often is you want the unexpected. But if it's all unexpected, it's quite a difficult, musical sort of journey to sort of like.
Yes.
And that's why I think, I suppose if you listen to some of the real, heavy jazz cats that are out there, where it's perhaps in the world they move in, it's not unexpected. But for someone like me listening to it going like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming, and it's all a bit uncomfortable.
Yep.
I sort of feel that's why that music is never mainstream, because mainstream is much more about, it's quite predictable, isn't it? It's comfort. It's just like, it's a nice musical cuddle.
It's a huge topic that you've now.
Really?
But because to me now you get into almost more the sort of spirituality of music, because you're right. What is music? When we hear it, it's like it's a emotive feeling? What about when we listen to music we grew up listening to? It's nostalgic. It's a personal experience. So the thing that you mentioned, if music is less demanding on the ear, on a general audience, that's what makes it more pleasing. But there are people that have, different tastes, and they're after that intensity. They're after that because it creates something different in them. And so the jazz guys that have studied so hard, their ears develop to a point where it's the opposite. When they hear something too similar, it's boring. It's like, what else have you got? And that's and that's what it is. But most people do not have that. Yeah. So it's not as comforting and not as comfortable to listen to. So you're absolutely right. And so then that comes into a general consciousness of what is music to people. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know if there is science out there, but in the last 2 or 3 years, I've just asked myself, why are major chords have a uplifting feeling and minor chords have a sort of more melancholy feel? It's like, what possible reason is there for that, other than maybe a million years of evolution and some natural connection to the way the world spins and vibrates? It's well, like otherwise, because it's the same 3 notes.
Exactly.
Sorry, it's the same 3 strings, just different note choices.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand any of that.
But you mentioned the perfect word. I was going to say, like, of course, I don't know either. I don't have any answers at all. But I think the word vibration could have something to do with it. Because if we're all like, human, we all have a vibrational frequency. Everything in the earth and matter, the universe. So a major chord, the way that the harmonics vibrate, probably just give us a sense of something, and the same with the minor. So it all comes down to good vibrations.
Good vibrations. Yes, the Beach Boys were right all along. Look, I think this is probably going to make a better podcast than a video. Isn't it?
Exactly.
Like you need to have this on in the background on a long car journey. But look, let's talk about, and we'll probably end up sort of finishing on this because I know you want to run off to London.
That's okay. Yeah.
Obviously there was a well-known guitar player on YouTube that obviously got involved in a bit of hot water recently because he was plagiarizing other musicians and maybe not giving them the credit for it, and there was some question marks as to how authentic was the playing in the videos that he was doing, all that kind of stuff. And I've met the guy 3 or 4 times and always thought he was a perfectly nice guy when I met him, and it's obviously always sad when something like that happens. Yeah. You were obviously on the sort of the receiving end of having some of your music copied.
Yeah.
And I think now the initial naughty boy telling off thing feels like we all need to take a step back now, and it's like, he didn't kill anybody, it's just like and I hope he's remorseful and will take a different path going forward. Yeah. But I thought there was an interesting topic of just, are players like that created by the expectation of the world nowadays, where if you don't look perfect and have the perfect political views and play your instrument perfectly, and I'm sure there are many other things that that would fall under that umbrella. Are we so critical now of anyone that doesn't live up to those expectations that it's like, is it any wonder that somebody fakes it to try and be the person that you want them to be?
Well, I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. There's the perception of people upon the person, and then there's the outward look from the person. And so what I mean by that is it takes, I think, a certain kind of person to chase the sort of adoration and doing whatever it takes to get that. And as I was talking about earlier about my personal choice, all I've ever chased is wanting to be the best musician I can be, irrelevant of success, whether no one ever knew my name or not, wasn't my priority. Yeah. But so then that comes down to the individual's decision. Well, what do I want? Do I want to play a certain way because I love music so much? Or, and I'm not talking about a particular individual, I'm just talking about the concept of it. So I'm not referring to Giacomo Weber, but is someone's desire to have that adoration, the driving force for doing such things and that perfection. So you could look at it from two angles. Is it the expectation of the people or of the person saying, I want this so badly, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it perfect, to just make sure that I get it, make sure everyone does think this. So it's either from the perspective of the person itself. I don't know if I would say it is from the outside world, actually. I think it's someone's ego saying, well, if I don't feel like I'm as good as I could be, now I can self-regulate and control, which didn't happen in the past.
I'm not sure I agree with, I've got two young daughters now, and I am petrified when they want to use Snapchat to apply a filter to their face. Yeah. The next level of that is inevitably going to be some form of cosmetic surgery, because it's just like, if I put a picture of myself online and I've got crooked teeth, or whatever, are there just going to be 100 comments going like, well, you're never going to get any far in the world, and I just think we never grew up with that.
No.
And I think we're in a different place now that, I'm very grateful that by the time I think I put my first YouTube video out, I was probably 40 already. I was a crap guitar player, and I knew I was a crap guitar player. And I think if I'd have been, I look at and Giacomo's a good example I talk about of the age group. I look at guitar players that are trying to put content out, and it doesn't have to be musical. It could just be anything.
Yeah.
It's just, everything has to be perfect. Otherwise they get so viciously trolled in the comment section, and they're just like, wow, is it any wonder then that it's go, well, I'll have to fake it then to be perfect. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's a sad indictment now of how social media, of what it's created.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that maybe it's a slightly different thing. So you're talking about the image in this case, which is a part of what we do, in this world of music. If you're an actor, actress, whatever, image has a part to play. It's something I've kind of come to realize, especially in this recent thing as well, how fascinating that is. But I can't control that. I don't look at it in the sense, I'm certainly not going to go and, whatever, have a next job or whatever. People got, Botox, whatever. But that's about the person trying to influence that, the outside world. But this is what I was saying earlier, like if you can focus on the very thing that defines you and have the courage to be authentically that, and don't allow that pressure. And I'm not saying it's easy, I understand, especially if you talk about young girls and that image thing. I know it's a big thing, that pressure, but for me, I would be trying to say, look, you're beautiful as you are. Think about what else defines you. It's not just how you look. Like, what's your qualities as a person? Forget sex and gender, race, whatever. What defines you? What makes you special? What do you want to do in your life? And let that lead you rather than just the image. Because there's ugly actors out there. Look at Willie Nelson. He's like old. He's not even a brilliant singer, but he's.
I suppose it's just, I feel I'm gonna, I'm using this a lot, and I've stolen this. But for me, there's just nothing social about social media. No. There's so little encouragement for people that are sort of, and I feel I'm incredibly lucky to be able to put clips of me playing guitar out on the internet, where I'm on a journey and I'm making mistakes like that. And by and large, the people who've decided to follow me on social media are probably on a similar journey as well. So they're relating to
Absolutely.
it, and it is uplifting. But you get, even now, there's still enough comments for it to hurt, of people going, you're shit, you have a shit tone, do you know what you're doing? You shouldn't have all this stuff. And I go, I don't care, because I just sit there and go, I know in myself, I know who I am. But I think if I was 18 or 20 or whatever on that.
I agree with that.
That would kill me, and I'd either give up or I'd fake it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not. You don't want either of those to happen.
No.
You just want to keep going and be authentic, and everyone around you go, oh, it's just say something nice.
Yeah.
or don't say
But
anything.
again, we come back to this interesting part, which I think is, I believe anyway, if the individual can focus on the very thing that they want, I mean, if they want to be a model, then that's a different thing, because it is about your image, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you either can or can't, be. But then again, it's still a subjective thing. Someone that traditionally may not have looked the most beautiful thing, maybe, as the world is becoming, more accepting of diversity and stuff, perhaps if you are not traditionally the most best looking man or woman, there is still a place for you in that world of like, oh, actually, you've got quite a unique look. So go with that. Don't try and change it. And then if it doesn't work out, then perhaps it's not meant to be. To me, the idea of trying to manipulate oneself in a way to fit with the outside world. And that, to me, speaks about the person that it's referring to. And I'm not saying that it's easy, because I didn't grow up in the world where those pressures were evident from a young age. Fortunately, I think so. So I do get it's a real issue. But if anyone is still watching at this point, of the younger ilk, I would say, just please ignore the pressure and follow don't think about your image as the thing. What is, unless you're a model. Forget a model, right? If you're a musician.
You can be all kinds of different models these days as well. So.
Or an actor, or focus on the art that you want to make, rather than what you look like. Because I think it's just it's such a weak argument.
Is that
what you look like,
Wasn't it David Bowie that said something like, if I said his name right, Bowie, he always get in trouble for that. Said something like, when he was growing up, you became famous as a result of being good at something.
That's
Could
right.
be in a field of academia or art or whatever. And even he was saying, he began to realise that actually there was a new generation where the pursuit of fame was, it was almost like, I suppose, reality TV has created this idea of, what are you actually famous for? It's just being famous. You're just famous for being famous. It's like, and I suppose, everything feels, I don't know, we're not giving people the space or the encouragement to go on the journey to become good at something, to then become well known for that. So that's what I mean about, like I say, I don't condone what Giacomo did, and I would not condone anything like that. But I just think the environment nowadays, the sort of the social media environment, isn't giving people the space or the encouragement to sort of go on that journey, evolve, get better.
Here's a word that I guess we've not mentioned, and is it actually the algorithm's fault, not the people? Because actually, we all know that the algorithm favors certain stuff, and which is an AI thing, if you think about it. It loves
a bit of drama, the algorithm.
Well, there's that. But what I mean is, so when you look at content, I mean, I was, again, talking with Ian last night from Laney about the difference between what I consider a content creator and someone who just shares content. So personally, I don't consider myself a content creator. I do my gigs and I put my phone up and film it. This is what I'm doing, guys. Here's a solo from last night. I didn't intentionally go out my way massively to create a bit of content. Yes, occasionally I'll do a demo or whatever. That's a little bit different. But I'm not chasing the algorithm content. Oh, something's happened in the world. Like, let's jump on this. I want to get more followers. I'm not into that personally. So what I'm saying is...
But would an 18-year-old Alex Hutchins in 2025, would he feel he had to chase that in order to give himself a shot of being a professional musician, or...?
Possibly, yeah, possibly, because of course it's a different time, and that is what's the challenge about where we find ourselves. But as the Alex Hutchins that didn't have to do that, I feel fortunate that I didn't have that pressure. So I'm saying, if you just focus on the art, regardless of what's going on social media, because that's the thing that will define what you do ultimately. And in this case that you just mentioned, unfortunately, it may take you so far to the point when it unravels, because the very thing you're known for you're unable to, do or express or whatever. So if you focus on that and let that be your guiding light, I think that's going to be better. And then let life dictate if it's going to happen or not. I think it's this thing of control, isn't it? It's like, I want to control that, so I'm going to do this. But ultimately, can you do that? Can you control people's impression? I don't know.
Deep.
It is. I know. That's what I said.
I think, yeah. Look, I'm pleased that we got the chance. I very consciously stayed away from making a comment because people will know that Giacomo had done a video with us about 2 weeks before it all blew up, and in some hyper unfortunate fate of timing, my video interview with Giacomo went live about an hour before the other dude's video about him went out. So we very quickly we were sitting there going, what's the right thing to do? And we just made a knee-jerk reaction going, look, just delete our video. Let's just stay out there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And then I haven't really said anything, but I do want to just, like I say, what he did was wrong. But I do think the time, I do think there are mitigating circumstances around the pressures on young people to be a certain thing.
Yes.
And some ultimately people will just get sucked into a thing that they can't. Once that first video of you being amazing, where are you going to go from there? You can't next week go, oh, actually, I'm not really that amazing. You just got to make the next amazing video, and then and then before you know it, you're a year, 2 years into sort of going the whole life is just make believe, isn't it?
It's interesting actually, just quickly, because I've met quite a few. Most recently, relatively successful YouTube guys as well, and it's fascinating because not every one of them, I think, is this is come on, maybe wholly satisfied with the content they make because I believe if something does well, whether it's what you really feel you want to do or not, the tendency is to go down that path, and then you find yourself on a path, and you may start finding yourself doing something that you didn't set out to do, but it may be working and it's very successful.
Right.
So, but is it what you actually really want to do? And maybe not.
Is this like when Jason Statham becomes like the sort of or Sylvester Stallone becomes the type of stereotype in the films, and really all they want to do is become
a rom-com actor.
Yeah, they want to play a sort of like a camp rom-com sort of, but they just can't do it.
No, stereotype. Well, kind of. That's kind of what I'm saying, and I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of me hypothesizing that, when speaking with people, privately, and just kind of, you sort of get this sense like, I didn't really set out to do this, but, it's okay. It is what it is, right? And that's fine. But I think so similarly with what you just said, if you put out a video of a certain thing, be careful what you put out, because then that pressure will follow you. Be more true to yourself and organic, and I think it will make you feel happier. And you mentioned that at the beginning. If someone likes something what you do because it's genuinely yours, that feels brilliant. But if you fake it a little bit deep inside, I don't think that's going to feel good regardless. So do what feels good.
So be true to yourself.
Yes.
Be nice.
On time.
Be on time.
Be authentic.
Smell good was another great tip that I got from Aziz Ibrahim. He's another very successful session player. He said, "Smell good." It's like, what's wrong with that? Anyway, I think we're probably on that bombshell. Man, we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
But alas.
No, it's been great. Thanks for having me, man.
No, thank you too. Congrats on everything that's happening to you. What's apart from this gig in China, what else might be on the 2025?
Just more music. I'm gonna be playing more of this style. So on my channel, I'm gonna be putting up more stuff. Putting out a few courses to try and help people in standard tuning, and not all crazy technical stuff. Just nice.
Does your brain just switch back into standard tuning?
It can do. I try not to do it too much, but because of the sort of courses that I want to do, I don't want to confuse people, so I'm just doing that, But so that's what I'm doing. So still teaching on the website, doing YouTube gigs, filming stuff, writing new music. That's it.
Be safe in China. I hope you
Thank
get your
you.
visa all sorted
Thank
out.
you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Please check out Alex's music and his own channel. It's very good.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you for watching. See you next time.